Okay, well, when we see the word conflict, we automatically think of bad things, and perhaps we think of something like this, which is people fighting and maybe even like a sort of physical punch up. So that sounds pretty bad. What we're going to talk about today is how can we reduce these problems in the workplace, in an organization, and potentially, possibly, have good conflict if that can exist. So I'm going to talk about bad conflict, good conflict, ways of resolving conflict, and maybe some solutions of where we have two groups in conflict. So let's have a look at this. Bad conflict, I think we all know what that means. We have some hostility, we have defensive behavior, we have a big disagreement between different groups. For sure, that's bad news. Okay, that is certainly bad news. And then inevitably the group disintegrates and we have, very little work doing, and things really go downhill after that. And then finally, the outcome of that is that we're really not doing very much work. So the productivity goes down and, it's really a major problem. Now, it is possible to have good conflict. I know it sounds like a contradiction, but we can actually have good conflict. And what does that mean? Well, it means people are being honest and truthful about their opinions. And when we have good conflict, we have new opinions, new ideas, a little bit of honesty. So that is actually a good thing generally. That encourages creativity, so people can come up with new ideas and be honest enough to say what their new ideas are. That's also definitely a good thing. And then finally, where people have conflicts, sometimes we can resolve the differences between people. And although it's quite a difficult atmosphere, eventually then people move on, we've resolved the differences, and people are a little bit happier about the future. So it's not easy. Doing this does involve a certain amount of friction, a certain amount of argument, a certain amount of disagreement. It's not pleasant, but if we could move from bad conflict to maybe good conflict, it would certainly be a good idea for our organization. So I think what I'm trying to say to you here is that conflict is inevitable because of different people, but we try and make the most of it. So what I'll do here, let's have a think about where conflict comes from. Now, I think there's probably four main ways that conflict arises. These are probably the four main reasons we have conflict. Well, human beings, people have different personalities, so inevitably we may have an argument with someone at work. That may not be your fault, it may not be their fault. We have different personalities that inevitably creates conflict. We may have different priorities. We may have different things we want to achieve. I would like to do this, you would like to do something else. We're in conflict immediately. Number three, resources are short. We don't have much money. We are short of money. That is a problem. So you can imagine in a lot of companies, perhaps 3 departments need a new member of staff because they are sort of totally overworked. The company can't afford to take 3 members of staff. We could only have 1 person. So immediately we have conflict. Which group actually gets that new member of staff? So that's sort of inevitable. And then finally, well, this also occurs quite often. We may have different methods of working. So one department may work in this way, another department operates in this way, and they effectively clash. There's sort of a clash of the culture. Now, I would say for most organizations that they need to focus on trying to reduce these problems. This one here, there shouldn't really be, in a lot of organizations, there shouldn't be differences in goals. We should really settle that problem earlier on. The top management should set the goals and the strategy, and the other departments below them should be working towards the same goals. So this problem should really be quite small. If it's big, the senior management need to step in and solve this problem. And then secondly, I think where we have different work methods and procedures, that also shouldn't really occur. Again, it's down to senior management to actually resolve these sorts of difficulties. We shouldn't have different systems in one company. So we get rid of that one, I hope. What are we left with? Well, we are left with two things. So there will always be conflict. We are left with different people and different personalities. And we are always short of money. That is just the way life is, frankly. So we will always have conflicts, but hopefully we can reduce them if we can get rid of these two. So let's see how we deal with conflicts in a sort of a practical way here. Let's have a practical example. Right, okay, we have some situations here, and this is 3 alternative solutions to a problem. We could have something called win-lose, we could have something called lose-lose, we could have win-win. I think immediately we're all thinking, well, win-win is the good one, and you would be right there. Win-win is really what we'd like, and win-lose is perhaps not very good, and lose-lose also sounds bad. So let's unpack this, see what they actually mean. So here we have win-lose. Now what is that? That's basically one group or one department win everything, they get what they want. The other group get nothing. So that is not an ideal situation. Now you may feel, okay, I've got exactly what I want, I'm happy. But just think about this a minute. When you have another conflict in 6 months' time, do you think this other group will be happy with you? Do you think they will be cooperative with you? Do you think they will want to help you in the future? So this is a bad scenario. We want to try to avoid this one. So I think that's definitely a bad one. Try to avoid win-lose. How about lose-lose? Now this looks also quite bad because it sounds like everyone's losing stuff. So that seems to be like a bad solution as well. It can be very bad. If everyone loses, then it can be bad, but sometimes we could have a compromise. And what that means is that people lose something that's not very important. So they lose a little bit each. So if it's a compromise, that is okay. It's not a bad solution. If it's simply that everyone loses everything, it is a bad solution. So I would say that's somewhere in the middle here. That's probably in the middle, basically. And then we have finally win-win. We have finally win-win. So that sounds pretty good, and that actually is the best thing. So what we do is we identify the best and most important things for each group, and we try and achieve those important things for each group. The trivial stuff, the unimportant stuff, the stuff that's like really not a priority, doesn't really matter if we don't achieve those. We sort of delete those. We just get the important things for both groups. So that's probably the best one. Win-win is what we would like to achieve, and that's really the solution there. Okay, that's what we're looking for. Hi Alex, you got a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you had like a well-run company, would you like avoid conflicts because it's well-run, or does it?
Well, yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? I would say that if you have no conflict, that's perhaps actually not a good thing, because we're not having any like honesty. No one's saying things that may cause a disagreement. There's no creativity. It's probably a false scenario. So I think if we have a small amount of conflict, that's okay. If we have a lot of conflict, that's quite bad. So even in a well-run company, I would say a small amount of conflict is actually okay. And so, yeah, we do have some conflict in probably every organization, actually. Let's have a look at an example here of these scenarios. So we have a guy here called Jack, and he appears to be a bit of a computer expert. And because he's so good at the computer systems, there's two managers actually want him to work for them. So we have three alternatives: win-lose, lose-lose, and win-win. And we would like to try and identify those solutions and try and see what they actually look like. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Alex to try and see if she can come up with a good solution for this scenario. So over to you, Alex.
All right, so I'd say a win-lose situation is obviously what we said we don't want, because that would mean that one manager would get Jack and the other wouldn't get him. So there would be a big conflict in the future. So that's a unhappy face. The lose-lose compromise, I think that means that Jack would have to divide his time in two. So get 50% to one manager and 50% to the other one. It doesn't mean it's bad. I think it just means that it's a compromise, really. And then the win-win situation would obviously be the best situation, and that would mean that Jack would have to delegate his work to be able to work for both managers at the same time. So I feel like that's what we want.
Okay, so thank you ever so much, Alex. That is fantastic. I mean, really, that is the best solution, isn't it? Can we get to here? This is what we want. And I think you've basically nailed it. So, well done. That's fantastic. So can we do this one? That is the best solution by a long way. We don't want this one. We have, on happy face here. We don't really want this one. That's not a fantastic solution. I would say this is sort of like a okay. And this is really, this is what we're looking for here. So thank you ever so much, Alex. That's great.